Howdy y'all, welcome back to Maverick Mods. Well, it's the beginning of 2024. I sincerely hope that everybody had a good New Year's, had a good holidays, and everybody has a good year looking forward. I think I'm going to. We're working on a 71 Firebird here. I know I haven't done a whole lot of recapping in my videos, but let's do that this time. Let's take a quick look at the car and just see kind of what's been happening, where it's at, and where it's going. So, 71 Firebird, rescued from a garage up in New Jersey. It was a project car from a guy that unfortunately had a heart attack a couple of years back, couldn't finish it, and we picked it up. Well, it was in a million pieces. Since then, it's come back. I kind of cataloged everything that came with the car. We thought that we had a complete car just in pieces. Turns out that wasn't quite the case. A lot of the parts that came with the car were unusable or were just in pretty poor shape, and that kind of dictated where we went from there. And so the decision was made, don't go restoration, let's go resto mod. So it's currently sitting with an LS1 T56 6-speed that's been retrofitted in. Suspension has been upgraded to coilovers, and we found a 2000 Z28 donor car that had been wrecked that had a whole bunch of usable parts on it that I figured could do a nice little upgrade to this car. One of those being the suspension. So it has the suspension from the 2000 Z28 modified to fit the 71 Firebird. So if we move around, took that one step farther, and the interior that we got with the Firebird was in really sad shape. The interior from the Z28 was in pretty good shape. And I'm retrofitting as much of the interior from the Z28 as I can. That'll include seats, front and rear, center console, steering column, foot pedals, dash, HVAC system. All of that's going to come from the Z28. In the interim, before all of that happened, we had to do quite a bit of sheet metal work, sheet metal repair, sheet metal replacement. The car came with skins on the quarters that had been applied really badly, and it kind of necessitated just doing a complete quarter replacement both sides. Wheel houses needed to be replaced. They were rusted out. The roof, we're not sure if it was factory or aftermarket, but it had a sunroof in it that had basically compromised the entire structure of the roof itself, but it had also allowed enough water in over the years that it had rusted the inner corners up here of the inner roof structure itself, to the point where the roof itself was compromised. So it got a complete roof replacement, including A-pillars. Trunk floor was rusted out, so the trunk floor has been replaced. The good news on the body itself, we did have good floors, good firewall, good rocker panels, and that pretty much covered the body. We thought we had good doors. Mostly the doors were good. Fenders, I'll get to those in a minute. The rear end has been upgraded to a posi, rear discs, trailing arms instead of leaf springs, torque arm suspension. Everything's tied in. Basically, the entire drivetrain is from the 2000 Z28. At the moment, what I'm doing is I'm aligning body panels. I'm zeroing in on the last of the fab work. I've still got some interior work to do, but I kind of need the shell a little emptier without the doors and everything on it. So as I zero into the point where it's time to blow this back apart for mock-up phase, clean everything up, and then paint it, I need to align body panels, get door and trunk gaps, fender, all that, hood gaps. Everything needs to be done prior to painting. So this week we're going to concentrate on the deck lid, trunk area, and the spoilers. That's what I'm working on now. So grab your popcorn, let's get started. We're getting closer on the Firebird. One of the things that needs to be done, Kind of needs to be done now before I start thinking about taking the car apart for final sandblasting and paint, is I need to align body panels. I kind of prefer to do that when the car has weight on wheels. There are different opinions on that. Some say you can put it on jack stands and do it. It's just the way I prefer to do it. Let's do a quick walk around and just kind of see what I'm up against, and then I'll get started. So I've got the doors fairly close, but you know, they could stand for a final alignment. Same thing on the fenders here. I do have some metal work to do on the passenger door. I've got to fill the hole here that was for the 71 specific kind of a what you call it, grill emblem tchotchke there, and a little bit of metal work, but not a whole lot there. I've got more when we come up to the wheel wells here. This is all just kind of fill the holes. This was done back in the day. This was old school drill and pull, drill pull for dent repair. Little hammer and dolly work here. Otherwise, this fender's in pretty good shape. Driver's door is in pretty good shape. It's got a few dents here and there, but it's not too bad. Little hammer and dolly work will get most of that out. Again, I do need to do a final alignment on the door. And when the doors are aligned, what I'll do is I'll go through after everything's done, and I'll use a little 1/8 inch drill bit, and I will drill each one of the hinges in one spot, and that will help me realign everything when they come back during final assembly. If you notice, the fender's missing on this side. Driver's side fender's got a little bit more work to be done. I know it's just sitting here on the stand here. This entire section here, I've got a patch panel for this. I'm just going to replace all this with a patch panel. And this fender's got some, it's got some work to be done on it to get it up to speed. Of course, I'll have to work on the bumper, front bumper as well, and the valence panel up front. Back here, which is where I'm going to start with today, is the deck lid. I've got the deck lid aligned. I'll have to go through and do a final check and alignment on it, but it's basically there. I've got the latch mechanism in it just to make sure everything's lined up and functional. But the previous owners of this deck lid had a really weird spoiler mounted to this thing. It's like the spoiler came from a Mitsubishi or something, and they drilled holes in it in the deck lid in order to mount that spoiler. These holes are gonna have to go away, so I'll deal with that. The other thing I need to do is mount the actual Firebird spoilers, rear spoiler I should say. So we'll work on that. So let's get started with these holes. Let's start with these holes in the deck lid. Now the holes go through top and bottom, so I'm going to fill both of them. I've got a couple of different ways I can do this. These holes are a little bit too big just to use the welder just to fill in. It would just transfer too much heat to the surface, and it's really difficult to keep it from warping. Normally when I have a hole like this and I can reach the backside, I would just use a brass buck behind it and I can just weld right on there. But I can't do that in this case because I can't get to the backside. So my solution is going to be, I've got a piece of all thread here. It's kind of left over from other projects. And these holes are close. They're not quite there. I think the bottom one's a little bit closer. I'm going to stick that all thread all the way through both sides and tack each side, and then just cut it off and move to the next one. Actually, I'm going to come in from the top side so I can cut it off a little bit easier. And that will fill both holes. Probably the easiest, fastest. The only other option I would have literally would be to cut some really tiny plugs to fill that. This is just, I think, the best way to do this. So let me get started. I've got to grind the paint off and get the welder out. And I think I'm going to need also to enlarge some of these holes because not all of them are fitting very well. That one fits, but this one doesn't. So let me start prepping the surface. I'm gonna take my step bit and just enlarge these holes out to 3/8, the ones that aren't. And I'm gonna use the step bit because it'll take less chance of snagging on the edge of the hole with a regular drill bit, less chance of tearing the metal or distorting the metal. Let me check and make sure. Oh, perfect. Okay. I'll get the welder out now and position my all thread. Actually, it's going to come in from the top. Position my all thread and hit a couple of tacks. I'll get all 4 of them, then I'll finish welding. I'll go ahead and tack it on the bottom and just hold it. I'm going to leave a little bit protruding so I've got something to grind on. See, so I'll get the cutoff wheel out and just slice my all thread off. So as you can see, I just left them raised on the surface just a little bit. I'm gonna hit the ends with a grinder. Not bring it flush, but I'm gonna bring them a little bit closer down, I think. I'm gonna kind of work my way around so that I don't get too much heat in one area. Go hit the other side. So I've got everything welded up and grounded down. I can feel a little bit of a depression here. Unfortunately, I don't have any access to the backside. There's nowhere I can even get a spoon up in there to try and bring that back up. This one's a little bit better, but both of these are going to require some body filler. I'm going to hit these with some primer real quick, and then I'll go over it with a sanding block. You'll see what I mean. One of the important points of getting your gaps correct and consistent anywhere on the car is how do you measure that gap? A lot of guys will use a paint stir stick because they're all about 1/8 of an inch. Well, that's not always the case. So for example, I've got a handful of these guys right here. Let's just measure a few of these. .16. You kind of get the picture. So you kind of get the picture. These were consistently inconsistent, and so essentially for 1/8 inch I need .125, and the closest one I found, so I got to find it again. There's 1.16. Let me find it here. 1.5. I've got one here. About the closest is .121. So it's not quite 1/8 of an inch. And I've kind of decided on this car, visually you'll never really be able to see the difference, but I want the gaps to be just a hair more than 1/8 of an inch. And I'm kind of figuring instead of 125, maybe about 130. So what I'm going to do, instead of a stir stick, I'm going to take one of my wedges. So I'm near as anybody can be at 1.3, maybe just a hair more. There's 1.3 right there. Now I'm going to mark this stick right here. That comes out at 1.3. So the real key is consistency. You know, I mean, it's close enough. If anybody wants to measure my gaps and say they're not 1/8, they're bigger, cool, let them measure it. But the key is consistency. So how do we make sure that this is consistent? Because, you know, I'm going to wind up misplacing this around the shop somewhere, so we can fix that. I might not lose it, but just in case, I wrote it on both sides. So hopefully I'll be able to hang on to this thing, at least through doing the gaps here, and we'll see. So if we use my tool, and we'll just check my gaps here, I'm pretty close right up here. Gets just a hair loose right there. Of course, here on the deck lid to the quarter, it's way off. And it consistently is way off until we get down here, right at the very corner here. Then it gets tight, and it's actually a little bit less than what, it's a little bit tighter than what I want. So all of this is fixable. Let's look at the other side. Same deal. It's good up the top, a little loose right there. It's not as bad as the other side, but then again, we've got some really wide gaps back here until we get back to this corner right back here. Okay, so there's a couple of things I need to do to address this, but before I do the gaps, I actually need to address several things with the deck lid itself and with the filler panel. So if you can kind of see, I'm low on my deck lid here, so I need to raise that. And I'm just a hair high on my filler panel, so I need to lower that. Here I'm good. Let's look at the other side. Same thing, I'm low here. I'm not bad there, and I'm a little bit high there, okay? So another thing I've got to address is this right here. I'm way off right there. First thing I need to do is I need to get the deck lid adjusted at the tops here, because that will help fix some of that. After that, then I can start working on the filler panel. So to do that, I've got my deck lid adjusting tool. Let's give it a try. Some low there. A little bit more. A little bit high, actually. That's good. I feel really good. That's a little high right along here. Right there. Raise it just a little bit more. There, so I'm just a smidge high right along here. Better. All right, that feels good. So now that I've got my corners set where I need them to be, I need to work on this panel right here. And remember, this is a replacement panel, so you know it's fit, not guaranteed by any stretch. It's low here, it's high here. I can't really reflex the deck lid up. That doesn't really work too well. However, I can lower this panel. Right up in here, I've actually got a little bit of room to kind of pull this down, although I don't here because that's solid, but I do here. So I think what I need to do is I need to work on this, knock this down, and that'll help this come in. Then I can just screw that down, I think, and get most of that out. I massaged my little pad here, massaged it just a little bit here, didn't have to mess with that one over there. While I was at it, since I knew that my corner was high here, I worked on my tabs up here just a little bit. That one was a little bit high. Everything over here was really good. So I got everything back in, got it screwed down, and I'm basically back to pretty darn close. I need to work on the gaps. So let's talk gaps for a minute. With new quarters, it's really difficult to get good gaps without some massaging. And if you'll notice, let me grab a piece of tape, and this will show this a little bit better. I've got my tape running down. I've got about the same gap at the front edge of the deck lid as I had on the other side, but as it comes down, it tightens up and it tightens up. But you can see with the tape, you can see as the tape comes down straight, this is where my gap should be, and that would almost match the other side. But if you look at how the quarter comes out, it's got this little bulge here. That's just the way the sheet metal works when it comes out of the stamping press sometimes. So I'm going to have to fix this one. The other side I can work with. This one I'm going to have to fix, and I'll show you how to do that. So there's several different ways to do this. I'm just going to go about this. I'm going to take and use my marker here and kind of see where the quarter itself in the corner starts diverging from my straight line, which is about right here. So I'm just going to make myself a mark. You can tape, you can do whatever you want. How about we just use my marker, and I can color that. Now when I pull the tape back and get a hold of it here, that didn't work. Go from this direction. It leaves me a line there that shows me how much I need to fix. So I'm going to take my cutoff wheel, thinnest wheel I possibly can. I remember which one this is. This is like, I can't even see it, and I think it's like 3/32, whatever it is. It's less than a 1/16 of an inch. And I'm going to cut right along this line, and that will give me the ability to take and move this metal this direction. You notice the very end of that, I took my body saw, because it's got a little thinner blade, and I'm not taking it quite to the end there. I can move that metal a little bit and kind of smooth that area. It gives me a transition to come down. Okay, now we'll squeeze all that back together, and then I can just re-weld this as I move this in. So I moved the metal over. I've got a few tacks in place. Got my gap tool here. I'm good. I'm going to go ahead and finish stitch welding this. Get a couple more tacks in first, then I'll finish stitch welding it. How's that? Now I'll hit this with the grinder, we'll smooth it all out. I'll hit the rest of this with a file. I've got just a few little spots here that actually a couple of coats of primer might fill. If nothing else, just a dab of spot putty. Other than that, I'm just going to put a coat of primer on this. Just enough so we can see kind of how it looks when I drop the deck lid. We're back to our just slightly greater than 1/8 gap. Just to test that, I know the primer's probably still drying on that. But there's my gap, looks good. And I'm good up until about here where I'm gonna have to do something else. The other side is a little tight, but it's more of a visual thing. I think I can just move this metal a little bit without having to actually cut it. I think I can just go in there with a body hammer and just kind of massage it a little bit. And I'm not terribly worried about this, and the reason is because the spoiler is going to cover all of this anyway. This is just my OCD. I'm zeroing in on getting all the gaps on my deck lid sorted out. I took my body hammer, got everything good here. In fact, I might have gone a little bit too far, but that's okay. But I've got quite a bit of gap here that I've got to deal with. And of course, this is the elephant in the room here. And the way I'm going to fix that is with this right here. This is just TIG welding rod, 1/8 inch. Just so happens that the panel itself, 1/8 inch thick. And I'm going to take and I'm going to basically just kind of stick that right on the side there, if I can hold it steady, right on the edge. And I'm going to weld this rod all the way down to the point where I don't need it anymore. And then I'm going to blend that all the way back up. So I've got my area ground down here, and I'm going to take my gap tool and figure out just how far down I need to bring this rod. So my gaps are a little wide, starting, actually I didn't quite go far enough. So starting about right there, all the way. All right, so I'm gonna lay my rod in. I'm gonna put it right next to my deck lid. And we're gonna stitch weld this thing down and kind of work it down as I go. Just gonna tack it with the deck lid in place, and I'll actually remove the deck lid and do the final welding on it, because that's a lot of welding spatter that would wind up on a quarter. Okay, I've got everything positioned. I've got my magnets just holding the welding rod in position. Let's give it a try. I'm going to work all the way down, kind of work my rod so that it matches the contour of the quarter, and just hit a tack every inch or so, every 2 inches or so to start with. Okay, I got my welding wire tacked in place. Take my magnets loose now. Now what I'm going to do is match what I just did on this side. I'll do it on the other side. And then I'll take the deck lid off, and then I'm going to have to basically stitch weld the entire length of this to fill everything in. Got my deck lid removed from the Firebird, and I'm going to work on my edges here. So it's a lot of welding, a lot of stitch welding, kind of boring. I'll do a little fast forward here so you guys can see just kind of the basics of it. You guys get the picture. It's kind of tedious. Takes a while. It's worth it in the end. You know, back in the day, way back in the day, nobody paid any attention to get door gaps and trunk gaps anyway, but it's a thing now, and it really does offset and helps the look of the finished product for sure. And like I said, it takes time to do it. It is worth it in the end. The big thing, as you can see, is just try and keep from getting too much heat in the panel. Use air, space your stitch welds out. I grind in between my stitch weld passes. Not everybody does. It's just a technique thing. Other than that, I can't finish this up yet because I still got to do the bottom, so I'm still adding heat to this panel, or I should still add heat to this portion of the panel. So off camera, I'm going to finish up the bottom and finish up the other side. We'll come back and look at the final finishing touches on this. All the welding is done. As you can see, this is the inside. I've got it all built up. Both sides are done. Of course, the outsides are done. So the next step is, instead of a welder and a grinder, we're going to switch to a file and a sander. Let me get this turned over and I'll show you what I mean. What I'm going to do here with the file, this is a kind of a multi-step process with the file and the sander as well. What I'm doing with the file is I'm basically just looking for obvious high spots. Okay, I don't want to go too crazy with it yet because I've still got to trim this edge. And like I said, it's going to be a multi-step process. Let me hit this with the sander real quick, both sides, and then I'm going to put the deck lid back on the car. I've got the deck lid reattached and aligned. Used my little drill a hole in the hinge in the deck lid method to make sure I got the same alignment coming off as I had going on. Now what I need to do is I need to taper each one of these to match the gap. So first thing grinder, second thing file, third thing sander, a straight edge probably thrown in there at some point in time, plus my little gap checking tool. So here we go. So essentially this is just grind a little, check it, grind a little more, check it. Okay, that was pretty close. I've got a little bit wide right here, but again, the spoiler's going to cover this, so I think I'm going to go ahead and leave that. Hit it with the file. Still a little close here. Use the old Mark 1 eyeball once in a while. I got a spot right there. Much better. Okay. Next I can hit this with the sander, and that's going to be kind of a dual action here, because I need to look down here and check to make sure that I've got consistent thickness on my edge, but also that'll help me look at some of the high and low spots up here as well. And the final step, I'm going to hit the edge here and just kind of round the edge. Use the sander on that, because that'll take the least amount of material. That way I can work my way into it. Feels good. I am going to have to take the file and the sander right to this corner here. It's a little bit sharp, just to knock the edge off. Perfect. All right, let me hit the other side, and I'll get some primer on this, and let's see how it looks. With a little bit of primer on the bare metal there, I actually just kind of extended it over to the quarter just a little bit, just so you could kind of see. Basically, all we're looking for is consistent gaps, which you can see it's got now, which it didn't have before. So that part of the deck lid is complete. Next part, I'm going to have to fit the spoiler. Of course, this one never had one from the factory, so I will have to locate the spoilers, mark and drill the holes for the spoiler attach points. Spoiler is fresh from getting all the old paint ground off of it. This one came with the car. This was the blue one on the old blue deck lid. It came with the car, but it wasn't original to the car. Doesn't matter, still fits. All right, I think that'll hold it for now. And the reason I'm doing this is, since this is a 3-piece spoiler, I've got pieces on both sides. I've got one factory spoiler piece. They call them spoiler extensions for the side. I've got one factory piece, and I've got one aftermarket piece, which you can see over here on my little table there. So one of them fits better than the other. You can kind of guess which one. Now I need to get the other pieces fitted, and then all three of them together will need to be adjusted together. And then when I get the position marked, then I can start thinking about drilling some holes in the deck lid and in the quarters. Not great. I mean, it is a factory piece, but I've got a high spot right in there that I need to address to get it to kind of sit down. So let me take it and work on that just a little bit. Take a little bit at a time. Getting closer. I'll keep working on this. Now that I've got everything sized and fit to the deck lid, I've got to transfer over my mounting locations so I can drill the holes in the deck lid itself. Easiest way I can think of, I take a piece of tape, run along the center line of the bolt hole, carry that around to the front, and I'll do this on all of these. Then I take my calipers, can measure from the leading edge to the center line of the hole, 1.165. Then I can write this on the tape. Okay, I can do that for each one of these holes, and that way I will know how far back, once I make my center line mark, I can know how far back to make the hole. When I set this back, I've got some lines marked. I'll just line it up. Now I can just mark the top of the tape. I can transfer my measurements onto my tape. 165. Measure twice, cut once. Alright, I double checked, I even triple checked all of my measurements. My holes are all supposed to be in the right place. So I'm going to mark all my holes. And let's drill some holes in the deck lid. I've got all my pilot holes drilled. And there's a quick way to check to make sure before you go all crazy and put some great big holes in the backs of these things, or the side, the bottoms of these things. All of the deck lids, whether they have a spoiler installed or not, all have holes. You can see my hole drilled through right there. They've got slots. Of course, on the sides they don't. But in the center 4, there are slots in there that you can go up in there and get your nuts on the back sides of these. So that's a good way to check, did I get my hole in the right spot? Okay, holes are drilled. Let me prep the spoiler, put the studs back in it, see if it fits. That's perfect. That fell right in. I've got my measurements, side to side, edges, all checked. Gonna tighten everything up. Just enough to hold everything in place. Gonna hit them slowly in each corner. I'm gonna work from the center out. Just kind of tighten everything up. A little bit more than just by hand. Not too tight. By tightening up the center spoiler section, what that will let me do is do the same thing on the spoiler extensions that I did in the center section. I can measure them, position them, mark the holes, and get these mounted in place. Well, I went ahead and mounted up the driver's side spoiler extension. It pulled in tighter, I should say, it pulled in better than I thought. I'm going to do a little trimming here because I don't really like the way this looks down here. I think I can kind of clean that edge up a little bit. And I think it's going to take a little bit of just right here at the opening for the taillight, just a little bit to kind of match the curve of the taillight panel itself, or the quarter itself. But it pulled in better than I thought it would. Let's do the other side. This is the replacement. This is the aftermarket spoiler extension. Let's see what happens on this side. I don't think I'm going to get quite as lucky here. Alright, so I'm lined up there. See, if I just kind of put this right where it's supposed to be, it just, well, you know, it's actually not bad right there. Alright, lined up pretty good there. Mark the front. Let's stick it on there, see how we did. See, this right here, I just missed that hole by a frickin' mile. This is why you measure twice, measure once, measure twice, measure 3 times, cut once. Measured on, I went to the wrong side of the tape line. I have to fill that hole. That's for another day. Actually, it's for later today. Now let's see if it fits. And it does. All right. There's your lesson for the day. Measure twice, drill once, cut once. Final lesson for the day, how to fix your own screw up. So I'm going to fill in this hole right here. First thing, grind the primer off. I've got to fill this hole here, and the hole is 3/8 of an inch. It's right on the edge of should I make a little plug for it or just weld the hole up. You can do it either way. You're going to add probably just as much heat to the panel either way. I'm going to go ahead and weld the hole up without a plug. I'll show you how to do it. What you need, obviously you need your welder and a brass buck that you can stick behind the hole. So I'm just going to fill this very slowly, and just, here we go. Now the key to doing this right is go slow. You don't want to add too much heat to the panel, so I'm going to do maybe 3 little stitch weld tacks, and then I'm going to stop, let it cool. Use a little air on the panel, keep the panel cool, and I'm just going to work my way around and slowly fill the hole in. Now I hit it with the grinder, start grinding down my weld. Now I'm going to go get a file, hammer and dolly. Might need to hit it just on the back side just a little bit, just to kind of pop it up just a hair. We'll see. It's actually not bad. Let me get a file and see what it looks like. Might be all it needed right there. The spoiler's going to cover all of this. So again, this is all my OCD, but I want that to look as good under the spoiler as everything else. I've got 2 things remaining, well, maybe 3 things remaining to do on these spoiler extensions. I'm going to start with the first one here. The back half of it just doesn't quite match the contour of the taillight opening here quite the way I wanted to. I'm going to bring that out so it kind of matches all the way back, and it's loose right here, so it doesn't quite look exactly like it would when I've got it tightened up. But what I did is I just took my Sharpie, cut on the back side, and left a line that you can see right there. I'm going to start there with a flap wheel on my die grinder and just take it back, recontour it, put it back in there and see how it fits. Okay, so I'm even here, actually out a little bit. I can fix that, and I could even stand to take maybe a little bit more right along here. So I finished recontouring this area right here. It looks a lot better, I think. Take a little bit more with the sandpaper to kind of final smooth it, but it's in the ballpark. The only other thing I can think about this is the heights don't quite match up here. You can kind of see that. And I'll have to build this area up a little bit. There's going to be a little contouring that's going to be required on this whole piece right here because it's too thick here compared to the rest of the spoiler. But I can work on that. I have to be careful up here though, because it'd be easy to knock off. If you just put Bondo or something up here, it's not going to stick very well. So I'm going to have to do my fiberglass on that, or actually my epoxy, I should say, on that to build that up. And the last thing on this side, I'm going to step back and really look at this spoiler. I think I could just recontour it here, but I'm going to wait on that just a minute until I get the other side done as well. And I can do both of them equally at the same time. Alright, I got it done on the passenger side. Not too bad. I've got a little bit, maybe just a sand on right here, but it's pretty close. Looks good. The good thing is, also, I worked on my little pads back behind here on the piece, and once I did that, it kind of rotated the whole spoiler extension just enough that it tightened up back here. I'm not going to have to fix this corner, so I'm pretty happy about that. This side, because this is a replacement spoiler extension, they kind of make this, it's the same piece from 70 all the way through, I guess, 81. And there's some slight differences, the early years versus the later. This piece is supposedly fit for the later years, and so this corner is a little bit different, which is why it looks different on this side. So I'm going to keep that one because it kind of flattens out, and I'm just going to take it, I'm just going to contour the bottom of this so it matches that side. Okay, let's back up just a little bit and take a look at the back corners here. I went ahead and contoured this area here so it would match the other side as well. So that's that side. Might take a little bit more tweaking, and that's that side. So I think they match pretty good. All right, so I've got some work yet to do on the spoiler. Basically just to kind of match this contour here and this one here. About as close as I'm going to get it, I think. But I can thin that out and that'll make that look a little bit better. It's just a little bit thick there. And I've still got to work on the spoiler extensions a little bit. But for all intents and purposes, I think we can put a done stamp on this for now. And move on to other things. That's going to do it for this week, guys. Got the deck lid adjusted. Gaps are right where I want them to be. Spoilers are adjusted, again, right where I want them to be. And just a hint of work left to do on them to get them basically ready for paint. Certainly appreciate everybody watching this week. Big thanks to all you guys for following along. Please like, share, and subscribe. It certainly does help me out. In fact, it really, really does help me out. Everybody have a great day.